Good morning students, welcome to the class. Respiration in plants, a small part of the chapter is left. So let us complete today and we will start with the next chapter. Okay. So respiration in plants, we have covered Krebs cycle. Thereafter in the last class we covered ETS, then oxidative phosphorylation. Now we are moving on to the last part of the chapter, that is respiratory pathway and amphibolic pathway. See. So metabolism, you know what is metabolism, isn't it? So what is metabolism? It is of two types. One is your anabolism and another one is your catabolism. You know what do you mean by anabolism? Anabolism means what? Synthesis. Something is synthesized, something is made, something is produced. It is called as anabolism. Catabolism, something is broken down. That one we call it as what? Catabolism. So metabolism, when you are saying, there are two. One is anabolism and another one is catabolism. So basically speaking, when we speak about photosynthesis, it is an anabolic process. Anabolic because photosynthesis in which the food is produced, okay, the food is prepared. So it is an anabolic process. Respiration, if you are speaking, we call it as a catabolism. Why? Because here the food is broken down, means the food is broken down, okay, C6H12O6, that is the food, so that is broken down and what is released? They are releasing the energy. So here breaking is taking place, so it should be catabolism. But we usually refer respiration as an amphibolic pathway. We cannot tell it as a catabolic process or an anabolic process, and we call it as an amphibolic pathway. Why it is amphibolic? Because amphibians, you know, isn't it? Both if they are doing, then the same here. Amphibolic pathway, why? Because respiration in which you can find there are series of steps like glycolysis is there, isn't it? At the end of glycolysis, what is produced? Pyruvic acid. This pyruvic acid can be used for some other reactions also, because this is a raw material for other reactions. So something is produced like pyruvic acid, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, like that many things are getting produced, isn't it? So since things are getting produced, we call it as what? Anabolic. And another one is that in respiration some things are broken down also, right? So in a respiration both is taking place, means both catabolism is also taking place as well as anabolism. Here the food is broken down, the glucose is broken down, yes, broken down, so it is catabolism. But at the same time, when this food is broken down, when it is undergoing glycolysis, Krebs cycle and all, they are producing many substances, isn't it? So many means what is that? Chemicals are produced, and these chemicals can be used for some other metabolic reactions. So since they are producing some intermediate many chemicals which can be used for some other processes, we call this one as anabolism, because something is produced, okay. So for best example is glycolysis. At the end of glycolysis, I am getting what? The pyruvic acid. In case of this pyruvic acid in plants and all, they can use it for the C4 pathway, like that they can use for some other purposes. So then we call that one as anabolism. So respiration is both a catabolic as well as an anabolic reaction. That's why we name it as amphibolic pathway. What do we call it? We call them as amphibolic pathway, okay. So you can see, I will just read out what has been given. It's not that clear, I will read out. Since respiration involves breakdown of substances, it is a catabolic pathway. Different substrates enter the respiratory pathway and also certain intermediates of the pathway are withdrawn, okay. For synthesizing something, some substances are taken. So this is an anabolic pathway, okay. Since both catabolic and anabolic pathway is involved, it is called as what? Amphibolic. So respiratory pathway involves both catabolic as well as anabolic pathway. That's why it is called as what? Amphibolic pathway. A very important homework question. Why is respiration considered as an anabolic pathway? In this you have to say that since food is broken down, it is catabolic, but at the same time in the respiration process, you can find many products are produced. So these produced product can be taken, and intermediate steps it can be withdrawn and can be used for some other reactions. Since it is producing some substances, it can also be considered as an anabolic pathway. So since it is having both the catabolic and the anabolic mechanism, it is called as amphibolic pathway, right? So this is regarding your respiratory pathway. Next, this is the diagram which is given in your book. And this diagram we need to study, understand what does this mean. See, whenever we are speaking of respiration, usually we are speaking about glucose, isn't it? So, this glucose, if you are seeing, it is a carbohydrate, C6H12O6, simple sugar, the glucose, when you are seeing, it is a carbohydrate. But whatever food we are taking is all carbohydrate? No, the food contains some other substances also, isn't it? There's some other major, like vitamins and minerals, you leave it because they are minor quantities only is needed by our body, we are taking it. But major quantity, it's not that we are always depending upon only carbohydrate. When I am eating food, I am eating fats. When I am eating food, I am eating proteins also. So, does that mean that if it is only carbohydrate giving me energy? No, it is not only carbohydrate giving me energy. Carbohydrate, obviously they give more amount of energy, but when you are seeing this, fats as well as proteins are also playing their role in providing me with energy. More stuff I take carbohydrate, less we take what? The fats and proteins. Proteins also to some extent more you can take, or especially when it goes with the little kids, protein rich food should be given because it is a body building material which is very much needed. So, here what we are going to discuss in this diagram is that they are saying how the different major food components, that is fats, carbohydrates and proteins, at last they are giving energy. Okay. So, how it is? So, carbohydrate we have already discussed. So, carbohydrate, it is simple sugar, it is undergoing glycolysis, isn't it? So, glucose 6-phosphate, fructose 6-phosphate, fructose 1,6-bisphosphate, dihydrogen acetone phosphate, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So, this pyruvic acid is formed. Till this it is what? Glycolysis. Some steps are missing here, not given. So, glucose, when you are seeing, it is broken down into pyruvic acid by a process called as what? Glycolysis. We have already learnt how it is taking place. So, pyruvic acid is formed. Now, this pyruvic acid is oxidative phosphorylation is carried out and they are forming what? Acetyl coenzyme A. This acetyl coenzyme A is entering the Krebs cycle, isn't it? And they are means with the addition of oxaloacetic acid and all, they are forming citric acid, and the Krebs cycle is taking place. In this, carbon dioxide is released, energy is also released, water is also formed, isn't it? So, this is the respiratory pathway for glucose. Now, what about proteins and fats? Listen, proteins, when you see, when the proteins are digested, so proteins, when I am having it my food, the proteins are broken down by the digestive system by different sorts of enzymes into amino acids. So, what is the simplest form of protein? It is amino acids. So, proteins are broken down into amino acids, okay. And other one is what? It is the fats. So, when you are having fats, what is fats doing? What is happening to the fats? The fats are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. So, proteins are broken down into amino acids and fats are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. Carbohydrate is broken down into sugar. So, this is digestion, isn't it? So, these are the simplest form. These are the simplest form of the complex forms, fats, carbohydrates and proteins. Now, this amino acid, what is happening to this amino acid? Listen, this amino acid is undergoing a process called as deamination. What is the process? Deamination. So, deamination, deamination, and they are producing pyruvic acid. What is produced? Pyruvic acid. Okay. So, amino acids undergo a process called as deamination. When this amino acid is undergoing deamination, they are resulting in the production of what? The pyruvic acid. Now, you know what will happen to the pyruvic acid? The pyruvic acid will be converted into acetyl coenzyme A, and then they will undergo the Krebs cycle and the energy will be released. So, like this, proteins are converted into energy. Okay. Now, fats, how they are getting converted into energy? Listen carefully. Fats, when you see, when it is being acted upon by an enzyme called as lipase, you would have learnt, it is getting digested to fatty acids and glycerol. This is the simplest form of fats. Now, this glycerol is converted into dihydrogen acetone phosphate. Okay. So, you know dihydrogen acetone phosphate is equivalent to what? Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, they are irreversible. Sorry, they are reversible, and this dihydrogen acetone phosphate is entering the glycolysis stage and the whole process is taking place, and what is released? The energy is released. That is regarding glycerol. Now, what is happening to this fatty acid? This fatty acid are undergoing a process called as beta oxidation. Oxygen is added. So, beta oxidation we call. So, here it is deamination, here it is beta oxidation. Okay. So, fatty acids undergoes a reaction called as beta oxidation, at the end of which they are producing what? Acetyl coenzyme A. So, what is produced? Acetyl coenzyme A. So, I will repeat again. So, when you are seeing the fats are broken down to fatty acid glycerol through digestion, and this glycerol is converted into dihydrogen acetone phosphate. Fatty acid is undergoing a process called as beta oxidation, and they are forming what? Acetyl coenzyme A. So, the dihydrogen acetone phosphate will join the glycolysis, and acetyl coenzyme A will enter into the Krebs cycle. Both the cases they are providing what? They are providing is what? Energy. Okay. So, like this the energy is produced from other intermediate complexes like proteins and fats other than carbohydrate. Okay. So, this is a diagram, okay, representing how the different types of metabolic pathway by different organic molecules. What are the different organic molecules? One is the fats, second one is carbohydrates, and third one is proteins are coming at last to Krebs cycle, and they are generating us with energy. Okay. So, when you have carbohydrate, obviously you have energy, but with proteins and fats also are having the capability of releasing what? The energy. Okay. The last part of the chapter is your respiratory quotient. This is a 2-mark question. Define respiratory quotient. So, what is respiratory quotient? We represent respiratory quotient as RQ. Since it is a ratio, there is no symbol for the same. Okay. Sorry, there is no unit for the same. Now, when you are seeing what is respiratory quotient, it is the volume of carbon dioxide evolved for the volume of oxygen consumed. So, for respiration, how much oxygen is consumed and how much carbon dioxide is being released, how much molecules of oxygen is consumed and how much molecules of carbon dioxide is released, that we have to note, isn't it? So, what is respiratory quotient? It is the ratio between the volume of carbon dioxide evolved, means when respiration is going on, what is evolved? Carbon dioxide is evolved, to the volume of oxygen consumed, how much oxygen is consumed. Okay. So, that one we call it as what? We call them as respiratory quotient. So, respiratory quotient is volume of carbon dioxide evolved to the volume of oxygen consumed, how much oxygen is taken in and how much oxygen is given out. The ratio between the same is called as what? Respiratory quotient. Now, when you are seeing the carbohydrate, the respiratory quotient is usually 1, means in this reaction it is clear, 6 molecule of oxygen is consumed, how much molecules of carbon dioxide is evolved? 6 molecules. So, 6 carbon dioxide divided by 6 oxygen gives 1. So, usually for carbohydrates the respiratory quotient is 1. Okay. Incomplete oxidation, not complete aerobic. Okay. And when you are moving on to fats, it has been noted that here you see one fat, name of the fat is tripalmitin is given. So, this tripalmitin, when you are seeing, when it is broken down, this oxygen 145 molecules of oxygen is needed, and they are evolving how much amount of carbon dioxide? 102 molecules of carbon dioxide. So, 102 divided by 145, it will come to 0.7. So, respiratory quotient of fat is less. How much it is? It is only 0.7. Okay. And when proteins are oxidized, okay, means when you are when you are seeing the respiratory quotient for proteins, it is 0.9. So, you should remember the respiratory quotient for all the basic organic molecules. So, what are they? Carbohydrate, it is having 1, fats are having 0.7 and proteins are having 0.9. So, what is respiratory quotient? It is the ratio between volume of carbon dioxide evolved to the volume of oxygen consumed. Okay, how much carbon dioxide is given out divided by how much oxygen is taken in. Okay. So, with this we are coming to the end of the chapter. Hope you all have understood the chapter clearly, and if you have any doubt, please be free to call me. Okay. Thank you.